What comes to mind when you hear the phrase, the largest animal to ever walk on two legs? Most people might immediately think of the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, the undisputed king of the dinosaurs, right? With its bone-crushing bite and its towering stance, T-Rex is the poster child of prehistoric power. But what if we told you that T-Rex wasn't even close to the top of that list? That somewhere across the globe, in what is now China, a creature far larger, longer, and heavier quietly ruled the land. Not with fangs or ferocity, but with sheer bulk and surprising adaptability. This is the story of Shantungosaurus, a name that may sound unfamiliar, but one that belongs to perhaps the largest bipedal animal to have ever existed on Earth. We're not just talking about bigger than your average dinosaur, we're talking about bigger than most buildings, tanks, and buses. This was a living colossus, and it wasn't a predator. It didn't hunt. It didn't need to. Because when you're that massive, few things would dare pick a fight with you. Shantungosaurus is a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful creatures are the ones that fly under the radar, literally and figuratively. In today's episode of Extinct Zoo, we'll take you through the fascinating tale of how this gentle giant was discovered, how it lived, how it survived, and why it eventually disappeared. We'll uncover the fossil evidence, dig into the biology, and compare it with other titans of both the dinosaur and mammalian worlds. So sit back, imagine you're walking through a steamy late Cretaceous floodplain, and picture a beast lumbering through the ferns, casting a shadow over everything in its path. Let's meet Shantungosaurus. The year was 1973. In the Shandong province of eastern China, a team of paleontologists embarked on what they thought would be a routine dig. This region, rich in late Cretaceous sediment, had long been known for its fossil beds. But no one could have predicted what lay buried beneath. In a site called the Wangxi Group, researchers uncovered a collection of 5 scattered and partially incomplete skeletons. At first glance, the bones were so massive that the team suspected they had discovered a new species of sauropod, those long-necked, long-tailed giants that typically dominated discussions of size in the dinosaur world. But the bones didn't match the sauropod blueprint. They were shaped differently. The skull, limb proportions, and hips all suggested another lineage. It wasn't a sauropod, it was something else. Something stranger. It turned out to be a hadrosaur, part of the duck-billed dinosaur family. And not just any hadrosaur, but one so big that it seemed to break the rules. They named it Shantungosaurus giganteus, or giant lizard of Shandong. Its closest cousin was Edmontosaurus, a well-known North American hadrosaur, but Shantungosaurus completely dwarfed it. Even the smallest individual uncovered had a femur the size of an adult elephant's. That's just the baby. The holotype, the most complete skeleton found, measured 14.7 meters, 48 feet, and weighed over 13 tons. But that was just the average. Our larger individuals likely exceeded 16 to 17 meters and tipped the scales at 18 to 22 tons, according to some estimates. For reference, that's more than 3 times the length of a hippo, heavier than a tank, and over 260 times the weight of an average adult human. To compare, Stegosaurus, about 1/3 its weight. Triceratops, only 2/3 its mass. Even T-Rex, with all its fame, only just grazed 10 tons. And here's the kicker. Shantungosaurus could walk on 2 legs. When you're as big as a house and weigh more than 2 full-grown African elephants, you don't need claws or teeth to scare predators away. But just in case, Shantungosaurus came equipped with a biological toolset that would make any predator think twice, or maybe 3 times, before attacking. The most obvious line of defense was size. An adult Shantungosaurus weighed more than a semi-truck and towered over most other herbivores. Apex predators like the local tyrannosaurid Zooxanct tyrannus weighed only about 5 tons. That's roughly 1/3 of a mature Shantungosaurus. That size disparity alone made adult Shantungosaurs nearly invincible. But let's say a particularly bold predator wanted to try its luck. What would it face? First, those massive hind limbs. These legs weren't just for walking, they were weapons. Modern biomechanics suggest that the force from a kick by such a large animal could reach upwards of 30,000 newtons or more, equivalent to being hit by a small speeding car. That's more than 1,000 times the force of a professional boxer's punch. A direct hit could easily crush bones. Next, there's the tail. Long, thick, and built with tightly packed ossified tendons, it was like a whip made of reinforced steel. Unlike the more flexible tails of other dinosaurs, this one was rigid and dense, perfect for delivering bone-cracking swings if it needed to defend the rear. Then there's sound. Shantungosaurus likely communicated using resonating nasal passages, giant holes in the skull near the nose that would have been covered with loose skin. Scientists believe these could inflate and act like natural trumpets. When threatened, it's possible Shantungosaurus let out booming calls that could be heard for miles, warning its herd of danger. And let's talk about the herd. Shantungosaurus didn't walk alone. Fossil beds suggest groups of dozens, perhaps even hundreds, moved together. A predator not only had to deal with one massive, kicking, tail-whipping herbivore, but dozens. Good luck with that. Even more impressive, recent theories suggest that hadrosaurs like Shantungosaurus were capable of complex group behaviors, possibly even forming protective circles around the young, similar to how elephants or musk oxen behave today. The bones of Shantungosaurus were also incredibly dense and robust. Its skeleton wasn't just big, it was engineered for durability. Thicker cortical bone meant greater shock absorption and the ability to sustain injuries while remaining mobile. If it did take a hit, it could probably shrug it off better than most. So, while it didn't have claws or teeth meant for violence, Shantungosaurus didn't need them. It had evolved into something even more powerful, an untouchable colossus, a living fortress, an herbivorous tank with a built-in alarm system. Despite its armor-like skeleton and towering frame, Shantungosaurus was a peaceful herbivore with one major mission: eat. And it had the tools to do that better than nearly any other dinosaur. Let's start with the teeth. Shantungosaurus, like many hadrosaurs, didn't have sharp canines or tearing incisors. Instead, it possessed what paleontologists call a dental battery, a dense cluster of hundreds of tiny teeth tightly packed together into columns. But this wasn't a static system. As teeth wore down, new ones continually pushed up from below. Think conveyor belt, only inside your mouth. At any given time, a Shantungosaurus could have over 500 functional teeth in use and hundreds more growing underneath, waiting their turn. This self-renewing system allowed it to chew through tough, fibrous vegetation like cycads, ginkgos, conifers, and ferns with ease. Its wide, flat jaws were perfect for grinding rather than slicing. Its skull, while not flashy like those of ceratopsians or ankylosaurs, was beautifully engineered for efficiency. Strong cheek muscles helped move its jaws side to side, unusual for dinosaurs, and made it one of the few capable of true mastication, or chewing. Then there's the beak. At the front of its mouth, Shantungosaurus had a broad, duck-like beak made of keratin, the same material found in human fingernails or bird bills. This structure worked like pruning shears, clipping vegetation before it was sent back to the teeth for processing. When you imagine this in action, herds of 10-ton giants moving through dense Cretaceous forests, biting and grinding down thousands of pounds of vegetation per day, you start to grasp just how enormous their ecological impact must have been. Even modern elephants, which eat up to 300 pounds of vegetation per day, can clear entire regions of trees and shrubs over time. Now picture a group of 50 Shantungosaurs doing the same. It's not just impressive, it's transformational. Researchers believe these dinosaurs played a crucial role in shaping their environment. By constantly grazing, trampling, and migrating in herds, they may have acted as ecosystem engineers, creating open spaces in forests, redistributing nutrients through waste, and encouraging the growth of certain plants over others. In essence, Shantungosaurus wasn't just eating, it was sculpting the landscape. A slow-moving, massive herbivore with the appetite of a bulldozer and the teeth of an industrial mulcher. Shantungosaurus had size, strength, and numbers on its side. It lived in a lush, fertile environment and had no natural predators capable of taking down an adult. By all measures, it was a species that seemed built to last. And yet, like all dinosaurs, it eventually vanished. So what went wrong? To understand the downfall of this gentle giant, we need to examine the potential weaknesses that come with being so enormous. Because in nature, every advantage comes with a cost. Let's start with the most obvious one: energy requirements. When you weigh 15 to 20 tons and need to eat constantly to support your metabolism, you become highly dependent on a stable, abundant food supply. During the Late Cretaceous, the Shandong region was a rich, humid floodplain covered with cycads, ferns, and conifers. But what happens when that environment begins to change, even slightly? A shift in rainfall patterns, a drop in temperature, or the emergence of a new plant species less suitable for digestion could create a domino effect. Some paleobotanical studies suggest that plant communities were indeed undergoing significant transformations in the final few million years of the Cretaceous. As angiosperms, flowering plants, became more dominant, the older gymnosperm-dominated ecosystems that Shantungosaurus thrived in may have started to shrink. Then there's the issue of habitat fragmentation, being huge limits where you can go. While smaller hadrosaurs could migrate or adapt to a wider range of environments, Shantungosaurus may have been more geographically restricted. It's only been found in one region, modern-day Shandong, which may indicate that it was highly specialized and unable to spread into other areas. Specialization, while great in the short term, can be a death sentence when the environment changes. Animals that are too well adapted to a narrow niche often struggle when that niche disappears. Another hypothesis centers on natural disasters. The Guangxi group, where most Shantungosaurus fossils are found, also contains evidence of volcanic activity, including ash layers and pyroclastic flows. Volcanism can devastate ecosystems quickly and dramatically. A few major eruptions in the right place at the wrong time could have wiped out entire herds or sterilized their feeding grounds. There's also the idea of biological succession, that Shantungosaurus didn't so much go extinct as it evolved into something else. Hadrosaurs remained a dominant herbivorous group in Asia all the way until the very end of the Cretaceous. It's possible that smaller, more adaptable descendants of Shantungosaurus outcompeted their bulky ancestors. Finally, we must consider the role of reproductive strategy. Large animals often take longer to mature and produce fewer offspring than their smaller counterparts. If juvenile Shantungosaurs were vulnerable to predation and the adults reproduced slowly, a few bad years could devastate the population beyond recovery. Combine all of these factors: shifting climate, loss of habitat, potential volcanic events, and slower life cycles, and you begin to see how even the largest biped to ever walk the earth could eventually be brought low. It's important to remember, extinction doesn't require catastrophe. Sometimes, it's just 1,000 small changes, quietly chipping away at a species until one day, it's gone. But for over 10 million years, Shantungosaurus thrived. It dominated its landscape. It left behind hundreds of fossil specimens. And in doing so, it wrote one of the most impressive but often overlooked chapters in dinosaur history. In the grand gallery of prehistoric creatures, names like Tyrannosaurus, Stegosaurus, and Velociraptor dominate the spotlight. Hollywood, museums, and popular media have enshrined them as icons. But somewhere behind the curtains, overshadowed by their flashier, more fearsome relatives, stands a dinosaur whose scale and story deserve far more recognition: Shantungosaurus. It's strange to think that the largest bipedal animal to ever walk the earth is rarely discussed outside paleontological circles. Despite its astounding size and the wealth of fossil evidence, Shantungosaurus remains an underdog of the dinosaur world. And perhaps that's because its story isn't one of drama and danger, but of quiet dominance and subtle strength. Unlike predators that fought bloody battles or spiky herbivores covered in armor, Shantungosaurus thrived through cooperation, adaptation, and sheer endurance. It didn't need claws or clubs. It wielded power through numbers and size, through movement and memory. Traits that don't make headlines but shape ecosystems for millennia. Its very existence challenges what we think we know about evolution. It tells us that being peaceful isn't a weakness, that living in balance with your surroundings can be just as formidable as tooth and claw. And its fossils tell us something even deeper: that the world was once filled with creatures so grand they make our largest living animals seem modest. That for tens of millions of years, Earth's greatest walker wasn't a predator, wasn't a sauropod. It was a duck-billed herbivore the size of a building. There's poetry in that. A reminder that not all giants roar. Some just quietly reshape the world beneath their feet. Today, Shantungosaurus remains a source of fascination for paleontologists and a growing community of dinosaur enthusiasts. More than 50 specimens have been recovered to date, and each new discovery helps us piece together more of the puzzle. New reconstructions continue to revise our understanding of its musculature, posture, and behavior. We now know it likely held its head relatively low, ideal for grazing. That its tail was less flexible but more powerful than once believed. That its herding behavior wasn't just probable, but practically certain. And that its size wasn't the exception among its kind, but the standard. It may have disappeared over 66 million years ago, but Shantungosaurus leaves behind a colossal legacy. One that reminds us to look beyond the obvious and listen to the forgotten voices of the past. So next time you picture a dinosaur, don't just imagine teeth and terror. Picture a vast floodplain, a rising mist, and the thunderous steps of a 20-ton herbivore moving with purpose. That's Shantungosaurus, the gentle titan, the overlooked colossus, the largest biped to ever live. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. If you enjoyed learning about Shantungosaurus and want more stories of lost giants and forgotten marvels, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon.